Howdy, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Herdmates podcast. Today, I'm really pleased to be speaking with a friend and a brother, Danny Vega, Mr. Danny Vega of Fat Fueled Family. And why don't we just get into you introducing yourself to the rest of the Ruminati herd here?
Well, thank you, Peter. It's so awesome to be here. Every time we get together, it brightens my day. Well, first of all, we met in 2017, I believe, at KetoCon at an event, and we just kind of hit it off in a really big way. And my background, I was born and raised in Miami. Always loved sports. My dad put me in football at 9 years old, and it was just perfect for me. I was a very physical child. I was violent for a while. I had to go through anger management in seventh grade. But yeah, football was just a great just channel for me to channel that aggressiveness, and then by eighth grade, I was really getting into it, and then my football coach and my dad were like, because I was also a skateboarder.
Oh,
and
wow.
and they yeah and they said, listen, you got to stop the skateboarding because you got to pick one or the other. And so I did, and my whole goal throughout high school was to play college football. And I ended up playing at Columbia University, and did really well in high school. And college was just amazing, being the fact that my dad didn't graduate from high school, didn't even finish 10th grade. My mom didn't go to college. They're both the first generation to emigrate from Cuba, and I am the first generation born in this country. So it was just like, I didn't even know what Columbia University was when they first started recruiting me. I thought it was in DC. I figured District of Columbia.
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Yeah, and so it was amazing to be there in NYC, and was there during 9/11, and it was kind of crazy. But in 2004, I graduated, and my strength and conditioning coach had a really big effect on me, and I kind of always wanted to do this in the back of my mind anyway. So I found this really cool program at the University of Florida that was going to be the first of two in the nation, which I'm sure by now there are many more, non-research based master's programs for anyone wanting to go into either strength and conditioning, collegiate strength and conditioning, or athletic training, or maybe continue on as part of, before they get their PhD, maybe get some more practical stuff, because we were working on program design. We learned every single type of diagnostic testing, more focused on more like stress tests, VO2 maxes, and all that stuff. And was an intern in the weight room for the whole 2 years there, and I was working with men's and women's basketball. And then after about 8 months, I got a promotion and started writing the programs for men's and women's golf and men's and women's tennis. And then in April of 2006, we had won the national championship, and I was getting ready to graduate. And the assistant head coach gets the job at VCU. They offer him the head coaching job at VCU in Richmond, Virginia. And it was amazing. He called me on a Sunday and he said, listen, I kind of knew he was calling me because my mentor, who was the basketball strength coach, told me. And he just said, what do you think about Richmond? And I said, well, I've never been, but I love it. And yeah, we showed up there, and I was the head strength coach for VCU basketball, and we made history. We had the best record in school history and conference history. And then I did that for a few years. And then, my hearing my dad's words in my ear when I told him that I was going to graduate from an Ivy League school and then go be a coach, he was like, what do you mean? What are you doing? And I said, I was always very independent, and I never really depended on them financially. So I could kind of say, listen, this is what I want to do, and I have a plan. If this doesn't work out in 5 years, then I can just fall back on my education. And in 3 years, I had accomplished everything I wanted to accomplish. And then, having spent so much time with basketball coaches from the NBA and college, and just learning so much about the culture of collegiate coaches, and it's a lifestyle. It's not a job. And so, like, you basically spend the whole day, morning to evening, and you just go to sleep in your house. It was fine for me at the time, but I realized that it was probably not going to be the best thing long term, because I knew I wanted to get married at some point, and I knew how much that lifestyle would wear. It takes a special woman to be married to a coach, put it to you that way.
Mhm.
So I moved back to Miami, and I was just personal training for a while, and then finally got a job in pharma, and I did that for 3 years, and finally after 3 years, by the way, my whole pharma and medical device career was in women's health. So every type of surgery that you could think of in the female pelvis, I was part of that.
Mhm.
But yeah, after 3 years of pharma, it just got so bad. There was so much going on that I was being asked to market one of these products that it was just, I couldn't look at the healthcare providers and do it. And so I moved away from that, and I got into medical device sales, and I did that for 10 years. But in 2016, something changed. In June, I found the ketogenic diet, and which is just a really, really low carb diet for those who don't know. And I had, as you can imagine, having played on AstroTurf, which is just the worst type of turf, and just my body had been pretty beat up, and I also was powerlifting at the time, and so I just remember after a few days of that diet, just feeling so good, like my joints didn't hurt anymore. I felt like I gained several years back on my body. And so that reignited that passion for nutrition and fitness. And as the story goes, like 2 months later, I reached out to a guy named Brian Williamson, who and I told him, if you ever do anything with athletes, I didn't know what that meant, but I just said, just let me know. Maybe it was an interview, and it started with an interview. And he said, I'm actually starting an athlete podcast for ketogenic athletes. And we just hit it off so well that at the end of that, he said, do you want to be my co-host? I said, well, let me talk to my wife. And
Mhm.
a year after that, I had already gotten to the point where I was, Bayer had bought Monsanto, and I didn't know that part of it, didn't love it. And then also the fact that the culture was changing, and I just knew that this is what I loved, and I had the support of my wife. So I saved for a year, and fast forward to August 2018, we started our business, and I quit my job, and being the sole provider with two boys, embarked on this journey, and we just celebrated 2 years in August. And since then, it's just all been about, of course, for a lot of what I focus on has always been like performance and building muscle, and how do ketogenic diets perform, or how could they help people in all these different activities. And then as that continued, it also kind of morphed into, because of what we were doing with the kids, and we realized there were so many people getting healthier, and they had kids, and they weren't making that connection that maybe their kids are also human, with the same physiology, and that maybe they
Wait,
should do
wait,
that with the kids.
I'm going to need to see a reference on that
Eureka.
one.
Fake news.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it's so we just wanted, we were really passionate, and that's why we called it Fat Fueled Family, because we wanted to show how you put it all together, practically. So we had 5 pillars. It was nutrition, fitness, parenting, education, and mindset. And that gives us a lot of leeway to go into so many different subjects that we love. And here we are now.
And the last year has been quite a doozy, and you're still there. That's great.
Yeah.
I think it probably wasn't when we met, but I do still have the mental image of you running down the aisle after a presentation to get to the microphone to ask me a question after the presentation. And I must admit, I was kind of looking for a way out for a second, but then you stopped and saw, okay, we're all good. Um, so
I remember
I'm not sure how long I could have outrun you, but
that.
um, and yeah, it has been one of the bright spots of going to some of these conferences are these people that you meet. But um, We haven't been able to do that for a while, so it's wonderful to have the chance to reconnect. Fat fuel. Okay, there's an idea, because we're basically, well, we're told that, based on what the recommendation for what constitutes a healthy diet, that most of the energy is supposed to be coming from carbohydrate, not from fat. So this gets to the heart of what you're talking about when you say a keto diet or a ketogenic diet or a restricted carbohydrate diet. I mean, we're going to put ketogenic at sort of a lower level of carbohydrate than a low carb diet would be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you said that you learned about this. Remind me, please, the year you said, was that 2016 or earlier?
It's funny. I had never heard of keto, never, even in grad school. I mean, I remember learning about ketoacidosis, but I'd never heard about ketogenic diets.
Right.
But it was 2016.
So here's someone who's gone through this high level training, is working with athletes who clearly are concerned about their well-being as well as their performance. And so you essentially were out of that now. You were working in medical device at that point,
Hmm.
sales, and now so who did you hear about it from?
I always love having the opportunity because I give him so much. I'm so grateful to him, and he just started his own podcast, so I'm just so happy for him. But a friend of mine, Trevor White,
Mhm.
he used to work in the lab at University of Tampa with Dr. Wilson and now Dr. Lowry. And I remember in 2016, I kind of didn't go over this part, but I was powerlifting at the time and I had torn my meniscus in my left knee, and I had to pull out of a meet in March that year. So remember, this is before keto. So I was like, I need to get healthy. So I need to lose some weight. I was 245 pounds, and I was not fat, but I just was too heavy. And I knew if I lost some weight, it would take some pressure off my knee. And so I did what I knew, which was a bodybuilding type diet with really low fat. And, it's funny because when you look at things only through one symptom or one endpoint or one goal, you can do a lot more things, but then you leave out so many other benefits that you can get. So for example, like if you restrict calories, which is what I was doing by bringing the fat very low. Fat is much more dense in energy than carbohydrates. So like if you have 20 carbs, that's only like 80 calories, but if you have 20 grams of fat, that's 180 calories. So when you start bumping up that fat, it really scares people because they're afraid of the fat. So that's something that was the first thing for me. It wasn't that big of an issue because I was sick of eating turkey bacon. In fact, the first week, I know, can you believe that? I would eat ground turkey. I wouldn't even eat ground beef, ground turkey, turkey bacon. And the first couple of weeks of doing this type of diet, I had a pack of bacon, and I think I drank a lot of the bacon juice, like the grease and everything.
Wow.
I had a bacon aversion for like 2 months because it was just like,
Over.
it was just after that. But it's a very weird thing to be like, well, just don't eat carbs and eat all the fat you want. And it wasn't so much that, because I've always been methodical with things. So I was like, how much should I eat to build muscle this way? And I didn't really know. I just kind of, I had really high fat. Like I was having like 350 grams of fat a day. I felt amazing. I had already gotten to the leanness that I wanted to get, but I kept on getting leaner. And it took me over a month. I had to add 700 calories back to my diet just to stop the what would you call that? Just so much fast weight loss, because it was like my body was a furnace. And so like what people need to understand with fat is that we have this naturally almost endless fountain of energy in our fat, in our body fat. Like we have anywhere from 40 to 100,000 calories in our bodies that we can tap into. The problem is because we are just constantly eating carbohydrates, there's something that happens with a hormone called insulin, and when insulin's elevated, it's almost like it doesn't allow you to burn as much fat, you know. And so people, I think the first thing they need to understand is like the one of the only reasons why people have to restrict calories is because they're eating the wrong foods. And so it makes sense that you would have to eat less of non or less ideal foods, because you might it manifests as obesity, maybe because obesity is like, it's not the problem, it's just a symptom of other things that are going on in your body that aren't right, you know.
Yeah, I'm still looking for that image of the gasoline tanker truck that's out of gas by the side of the road with a full load, you
Who
know.
had that? I remember seeing that thing, and then it compared it. Who was that,
Yeah,
at a KetoCon presentation or something?
well, it may have been, it may be someone like Steve Finney. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
But
I
that
remember
that
that.
idea that you've got all this energy, but it's in the
Oh,
wrong
that was in the
storage.
book. Was that in the Art and Science of Low Carb Performance,
Uh,
right?
yeah,
I remember
can't tell
seeing it.
now.
Yeah.
But just as we are carrying around all this fuel, but maybe we can't get to it, and because we can't get to it, then people are hungry
Yeah.
even though they're carrying around all this stored energy. Like the batteries have been disconnected, or they only charge, they don't discharge.
Yeah.
Um, so, um, okay, this, oh boy, there's lots of ways to go with this. Um, so clearly, you can't build muscle if you don't have the right building blocks,
Yep.
right? So I guess why should and also preserve muscle, because if you don't routinely give the right building, the right nutrition, then we can see a loss, especially as we get older.
Yeah.
Or if people are sick for an extended period of time, there are conditions where they can lose lean body mass. So, why should we be concerned about building and maintaining lean body mass? And what do we need for building blocks, if you will?
Such a great question, both of them. So the first reason is, I know you're going to be like laughing, but at 39, I know I'm young, but my body, if I wouldn't have taken care of it the way I have the past, 5 years, my body would feel much older for sure, because of the mileage that I've put on it. And so I'm willing to bet that there's a lot of people that are going to be listening to this podcast that are probably my age range, maybe all the way to your age range, all the way. I don't want to say all the way. It's not that far. Uh,
Yeah, okay.
but yeah,
I'll reach for the Geritol now.
we're talking less than 2 decades, everybody. So it's like, it's not even nothing.
Well,
Um,
yeah.
that are, now it's like what my friend tells me about training. Before, when you're young, you train with your nether regions, and when you get older, you train with your brain. And the same thing goes for the rest of us. It's like when we're young, we don't care about anything like as far as health goes. It's more like aesthetics, and we just want to look good, and we just, but then as we age, we start to realize, hopefully, that there's an expiration date, and that we want to keep these things working as well as possible. And so one reason alone is something called sarcopenia, which is just, it's like, it's a combination of lack of activity, which means that less, your nervous system is kind of is innervating less muscle fibers, and your body says, you know what, we don't really need that muscle, so we're just gonna get rid of it, because use it or lose it. We
Mhm.
just, and that's a big part. And then the other part is that when we start losing, and it happens in the legs most, more
Hmm.
than anywhere. The legs are the ones, and that's why we hear about, when people have osteoporosis, a lot of the time we're thinking about the legs, or even like, people break hips, and all of those things are a lot of the time because of, they're so brittle. It's usually not, it's because something kind of, you fell because maybe something fractured and made you fall. It wasn't like a traumatic injury. And so we want to keep ourselves as robust as possible for as long as possible. If you look at the doctors that we respect the most, the ones that, not quite the the middle of the road, what you usually hear, people like Dr. Baker and Dr. Lyon and even
Ted
what's
Naiman.
Ted's last name?
Naiman.
Dr. Naaman. All these doctors who are talking about the importance of having a good waist to hip ratio, meaning like that your waist is smaller than your hips, and that you can still sprint or jump and do all these things. Why would that matter to my weight? Or to my health? It just so happens that it just makes you so much more resilient. And even I know Dominic D'Agostino has talked about this, like muscle, lean body mass is a great predictor for surviving cancers, So the more lean body mass you have, the more muscle mass you have, the more of a chance that you'll have for cancer. Because what ends up happening, unfortunately, is like you start to lose weight and lose muscle with cancer. And then what do? They give you like Ensure, and they give you like these high sugar drinks, which may pack the weight on, but it's probably not going to pack on the right weight. And it's probably not going to be the right thing if you have cancer, because we know that those cells are going to gobble up all that sugar and ferment it, as it ferments, and it's going to feed those cells. So there's just a million reasons why. So the second part, what are the building blocks? That's a simple thing. Like we know that amino acids, our amino acids come from protein, and you've done so much great work on talking about the difference between crude protein and usable protein. We can't just look at it as far as like grams, because what's more important is amino acids. Because if we're talking about building muscle, it's not as simple as saying get your protein in. We need to have an adequate amount of leucine and isoleucine, which are the two most important amino acids for signaling, anabolic signaling, meaning like telling our bodies to put on mass. And the most abundant forms are in our meat, our animal foods. I know that chicken thigh is really high in leucine and isoleucine, but I think it's the highest one, which you could say that's a good thing. And I love my chicken thigh. But if you do ruminant meat, you also get so many other benefits because it's so much more nutrient dense. So like anything, don't be afraid of red meat. Anything that comes from lamb, cattle, bison, goat, venison, all of those animals. Everyone here, I think, will understand what ruminant is, hopefully what ruminants are.
I'm so glad that you do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
you're the one who talked about how they're just like these magical animals that turn unusable food into usable food, or at least starvation food in some cases, into actual high quality premium food.
yeah, highest quality indeed. And my job has been to be a pipe, right? I didn't do the research. I just know of the research, and so I
Mhm.
take it from the source and I
But
try to
that's
find a
important because that
exactly.
research, that the layman is not gonna, never even gonna look for that, let alone even find it and then understand it.
Yeah. And I guess the other thing that I recently came across, this is a bit geeky and nerdy, but if you make hay or you make silage and the moisture isn't just right, you can get something called browning. So there's a heating, and what you find is this non-enzymatic binding of sugar and protein within the forage. And it lowers the protein digestibility of the forage, even for a ruminant.
Wow.
Well, guess what? When we take wheat, which is already a poor source of digestible, indispensable amino acids for us, and we make bread and make that crust, or we make a breakfast cereal where essentially the whole thing is crust, that's browning. That's the same thing. And so we're taking that leucine, which is one that's particularly susceptible to this reaction, and driving its digestibility, in some cases, well below 10%. So you've got something with a very low amount, and now you're decreasing its digestibility. So
So it's
that,
also decreasing feed efficiency for the cattle, right?
well, if you did that for the cattle, yes. But when we process cereals, for example, for feed as opposed to food, we don't do the same things. We may crush it, we may roll it, we may grind it, but those typically aren't the heating processes. So one of the things I want to find out here shortly is, okay, when we make these meat replacement products out of these various plant source ingredients, and we process them so heavily to end up with something that we're going to market as a, whatever, what are we doing to the digestibility? And that work is being done. I can tell you that, I know from conversations. But one conversation I had with one of these researchers, he said, if you look, say, to parts of the world like India, and you imagine an 8-year-old boy eating as much as he's physically capable of eating. So, whether his parents could afford that or not, but just assume that he had unlimited access to a rice and lentil diet. He couldn't ingest enough to give him the indispensable digestible amino acids that he needs to develop properly.
Wow.
And so, I've said before, there is such a thing, objectively, there is such a thing globally as too little animal source food in the human diet. We have lots and lots of evidence about it. It's high quality evidence from research perspective. I make the case that anything people want to point to suggesting that there's a harm from too much from a health nutrition perspective is really low quality evidence coming from nutritional epidemiology of chronic disease. It's really not of the same. So that's a bit of a tangent that I just took my own
Can I add
program
something
on.
to it?
Sure,
Because
absolutely.
you mentioned, because we're so passionate about children, and there's several countries in Europe, Italy and France come to mind. They have different penalties, but with the exception of religious exemptions, and I don't even know if those exist in both of those countries, because I know France is a little bit stronger with what they allow. Like they don't really allow as much, even with religion. It's illegal to raise your children on like a plant-based diet, because as far as illegal, it's not. It's you can get fined. You have to have there are a few countries where you have to have regular checks with the doctor and things like that.
And
Yeah.
I would think that that's probably more on, say, one of my campaigns is, can we rehabilitate omnivore as a word? Because
Yeah.
it seems to me you're either going to eat no animal source foods, so you're vegan, or you're going to be a carnivore and eat nothing but animal source foods, or you're going to be an omnivore, which is the great bulk of humanity.
Hmm.
And okay, you choose which ones you're going to eat, either because of personal preference, or you've discovered that you react poorly to some and not to others, or it's a matter of what you can afford, or it's culturally appropriate. All those things play, as you well know. But I think that it's clear. I mean, here are the statistics that I cite. We've got a quarter of children globally who are stunted.
Yes. Oh my
A
gosh. Yeah.
quarter of children 5 years or under are stunted. And that's due to a lack of the essential nutrients that they need to develop properly. And that's not just stature, that's also brain development.
Wow.
And from what I understand of brain development, if you miss critical phases, you never get to make those up.
Yeah.
So we're talking about something that now lasts for their entire lifetime. And when you read the people, listen to the people involved in sustainability goals and sustainable society sort of things, they're saying, this is due to a lack of animal source food in their diet. And there have been studies done where the intervention was 1 egg a day for a pregnant woman, and then while she's, breastfeeding. And then at some time down the road, they're able to measure scholastic performance differences in her children compared to children from that same region that didn't
Oh,
get
was
the
that that
intervention.
country in Africa that they looked at, where
The
they fed the children? It was like several months.
I
I saw
think
one in
Malawi
one of
is
those.
one that they've done work in. They've done work in others. Sometimes they go to countries where they're already eating a certain amount of fish as part of their diet. You know, where you're going to see this is in populations that are dependent on cereal diets. Um, and if they already have access to some, it really doesn't take a lot, you know. But in any, there's that. On the other side, we now know that again, older farts, we get less efficient at utilizing protein.
Oh, it's a big one. I should have
And
mentioned that one
so
for sarcopenia too.
so we have these projections about how much we're going to have an increase in demand for animal source food. Well, they say protein. I want to get us away from talking about that as if it's, you know, let's have a serving of protein. No, it's, but there's a forecast for demand increase in demand by 2050 of something like 2/3 for animal source protein.
Wow, that's a
Now,
lot.
I'm thinking that that's an underestimate because they're not accounting for the increasing age of the population and therefore their increased need for the
Did you
protein.
also tell in one of your talks? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but didn't you mention in one of your talks that they also use crude protein for the
Oh
requirements,
yeah,
or is that? Yeah,
yeah,
so that's another thing. That's
yeah.
another factor.
Yeah, well, and of course we're talking about they're predicting this increase for animal source protein, so they're already kind of,
Oh, okay,
you know,
okay.
cutting it down a little bit. But the idea, you know, I'd say, and I've shown this data before, that the vast majority of humanity already lives on a plant source diet, plant-based diet, right? The majority of their calories, the majority of their, yes, crude protein is coming from plant source foods as opposed to animal source foods. And I think all the evidence shows that we need to make those animal source foods more available, more affordable for worldwide population. And then we can look at what do we do in the higher income countries to address these problems of chronic disease. Not that those are exclusive to the high income countries, but it looks a little different, right? I mean,
Yep.
one of the things that blows my mind was discovering that 45% of humanity consumes 1,000 kilowatt hours or less a year, electrical
Wow.
power. That's equivalent to what a large American refrigerator consumes in a year. That's
Wow.
45%. The population of India that has no access to electricity, none, is greater than the entire population of the United States. And
And they're
so,
at 2 billion already, or
well, I don't know the
maybe
total,
one
but
point.
it's well over 300 million that don't have access to electricity.
That's crazy. Yeah.
So, and as they develop, you know, they're now trying to do what we did in the early 20th century, right? We being in North America. So these sorts of things, as I think about how do we, what do we need to do to help others develop appropriately? These are questions, and I think maybe if we could get a more global perspective outside of the narratives that we're being subjected to, we might be able to sort of get past a lot of the, you were saying it before, the us versus them, the outrage industrial complex, you know, the people that just,
So much
that's
money in it. Yeah.
that's their business. You know,
Yeah.
they would not be happy if we all just said, what can we do to get along? You know, what can we do to help each other? So now, okay, you married with two relatively young children
Yep.
in this culture. Um, how do you, what would you suggest, or what do you suggest for people who, again, maybe this is something they're just going to start learning about, and they're going to find some resources, and they want to start, they can't get to where you are after 4 years
Yeah.
of experience. They can't get to where I am after 13 years of experience. So they've got to, grow where they're planted. They've got to start where they are. But, it's a family dynamic. So
Yep.
what are things that people can do to increase the chance of success for themselves, and at the same time keep peace in the household?
Yeah, I think if you're talking about like if you're living with a partner, if there's, a romantic partner or like a husband or wife, the first thing I would do is talk with my partner, and just tell them, look, this is what I've learned. I find it compelling and I want to give it a shot. But for me to give it a shot, you know, I'm going to have to protect myself. And so I wanted to see if you can come along this with me. You don't have to diet or anything like that. This is why. This, and this. This is what I've learned. And then when those two come up with like, if there's some consensus, hopefully, maybe that you don't have to eat directly, exactly the same, but there should be an agreed upon list of non-negotiables. For us, it starts with three simple things. We never will do wheat, so we'll never eat most grains. We won't eat. I like to eat occasionally white rice if I'm using it. I'm Cuban, so it's like, but like I grew up eating white rice. But if I'm gonna have carbohydrates after a workout or something, if I'm using it for a targeted reason, then that's one of the only grains that I'll ever have. But we don't generally do grains, and we definitely don't ever have wheat, just because we have now our children, the fact that they've done it for so long, now they're coming up with their own list of non-negotiables. Like my oldest, Desmond, he knows, and so does Dean, about the wheat thing. Desmond's not a fan of cake. He doesn't do cake. Frosting usually leads into our second non-negotiable, which is food dyes. And then the third one is vegetable oils. So when I say vegetable oils, that doesn't include things like avocado oil, olive oil, coconut oil. Those are generally oils that contain, real fat, and it's not like you don't need like a Breaking Bad lab set to create the oil. You need that to do like with the canola oils and all of these other seed oils. Tell me about it. It's like, how do we get
You can't
rapeseed
put
oil
corn, you can't put corn in a
in a
press.
press? Yeah, you can't put corn in a press. Nope. And then I think they bleach it too. There's something that they do to bleach it to I don't know what it is, but either way, there's just all I will say from that standpoint. If I don't want to like bombard people with too much information, it's just that it's inflammatory. And if you feel like you have aches and pains, I'm here to tell you that it doesn't have to be something that you just resign yourself to. Like if you're a woman and you think it's like hormones, or if you're a man and you think it's because you're just getting older and it's just part of life, there's always going to be some decline, of
Mhm.
course. We try to manage it as much as possible, but like in general, those three things, and it just so happens that those three non-negotiables tend to cut out most packaged foods.
Sure.
Yeah. So I will say this is great for families, because I want people to understand that we are very adamant, and we kind of have strong beliefs, but at the same time we're very practical. And something that we probably do once or twice a week, every week, and we have to rotate through them because there's strong feelings from one child to the other of which one is better, is rotating through Wendy's, McDonald's, and Burger King patties. So
Okay.
you can go to these restaurants and you can order patties of beef, and you get really good nutrition, 100% real meat, no vegetable oils. And for example, if I go to Wendy's and I say, can I have 4 large patties, it's generally going to run me $6
Mm.
for a pound of beef that's cut into square patties and cooked for me, and I can eat it right there. I take my little shaker of salt. Do we have one in here? Oh, we don't have one in here. We usually have one in here. And I just, salt the meat, and I just, my wife and I have been saying this forever. Like, we would love to go into like areas where it's so crazy when you're living paycheck to paycheck and you
Mhm.
really can't step back and look at the big picture. You're just like, it generally is a little bit more expensive to eat out all the time, but these people are doing that a lot, right? They're
Mhm.
eating fast food all the time because it's quick and it's generally cheap, but it would never be as cheap as buying a quarter steer or a half steer or a full steer, but they
Right.
can't buy that much, right? They don't have that much money,
Or they don't have a freezer, or they
or they don't
don't
have a freezer. Yeah.
have, secure living conditions where if
Yeah.
you put it there, it would be there when you come back. Yeah, all
Yeah.
those. And then frankly, we stopped teaching people how to cook a while ago. And
Yeah.
so these life skills are missing for many people. So it's intimidating. What do you do
Yep.
with a roast versus a steak or versus hamburger and those
Yep.
sorts of things? Yep.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So we do a lot
So
of that. We do a lot of that. No, go ahead. I don't want to cut you.
no, Nancy's version was because she got started on the low carb before I did. It took me a while to catch up, usually does. But her approach was, this is what I want to eat. What would you like to eat? And then,
That's good.
and frankly, if we start talking to people about, ribeyes and beef stew and roasts and fish and chicken with the skin and eggs and full fat dairy, it's not exactly a hardship.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. It's really not.
so in fact, the diet thing is maybe even another one of those words that we need to
Yeah.
re-examine, because it comes with a lot of baggage.
Yep.
um, so, um, now clearly you're someone who has spent a lot of time around weights, and that's something you enjoy doing. Not everybody does,
Yeah.
but they don't have to, right?
Nope. No, I mean, I'll say, like, going back to the protein thing, there's how many people do you know? Because I know several who interestingly have really bumped up that those animal foods, and maybe replaced other foods that, like you said, our bodies keep asking us for more. My wife always says, like, it's like when we give our body that, that those healthy whole grain, heart healthy whole grains, our bodies are like, they eat it, and it's like, it's physically quite a bit of volume. So our stomachs are stretched, which is one of the ways that we gauge satiety. We gauge how we're full by the stretch of the stomach. But our bodies are like, wrong answer, try again. And we just
Yeah.
like, I guess we got to eat more. So we're struggling, we're trying to eat more. These people, they switch that, they up their protein, and a lot of them don't even do any type of exercise, and they're like putting on lean body mass.
Mhm.
After a certain point, you're never going to turn into Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Good, good.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Very true. Very true. Very true. But like, yeah, so I was in Cuba in 2018, and I remember it was before they stopped the travel, and I remember we were on a tour that wasn't a state sponsored tour, so we were really blown away by like how real they were with us. Now, granted, we speak Spanish and we speak exactly like them, so it's like you're talking with family, and so they're telling us all these things, so we could tell that this was going to be, we were going to get the real scoop from them. And we went to the plaza where Castro would do those nauseating like 6 hour speeches, and Maura and my oldest are out there going and listening to the spiel, and I had to stay back in the 57 Bel Air with my youngest, because it was beautiful. It was pink and everything. He was sleeping in the back seat, and so I'm with all these drivers, and we're just talking, and they're like, how the heck did you get so big? Like, they're just not used to seeing a large person over there like that. I mean, maybe the Olympic athletes. And I said, honestly, the secret is red meat. And he's like, they're all like, well, that makes sense. We can't, like, it's akin to killing someone. If you slaughter a cow and someone finds out, you better have every single piece offal and viscera and all of that better be cleared out because you can get in really big trouble.
Hmm.
And then they joked because there was a little guy standing over there and he was like 5'4", 5'5", and they said, you see him, they lowered his milk allowance, or they got rid of his milk allowance when he was young. And look, he never grew up, and they were just joking. Well, I don't know if they were joking, but they said it like a joke. So like muscle is so important. And I'm sorry, I went on that tirade there, and I don't remember. You were talking about building muscle, right?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay,
I think,
sorry.
or exercise. I mean,
Oh yeah,
people don't
exercise.
need
Yes,
to sling iron
movement.
around. Yeah.
Yeah. You know what the best exercise that I tell everybody is what I tell my parents? It's two interventions that don't have to be quote unquote exercise that can really improve your health and make you just feel so amazing. One is daily walks. If you can start by trying to get in like maybe like a 20 to 30-minute walk at some point in the day, and then maybe as time goes on, maybe turn that into two or maybe a longer walk, you're going to just feel so much better because the research suggests across all populations, all diets, if you walk regularly, you have the best mental health, the best heart health. Like it has all types of benefits. And then the second one would be something that Dr. Rhonda Patrick was at a some cardiology meeting earlier this year, and she made a bold claim that she said, I believe that within the next 5 years, sauna use is going to be used as a treatment because it's an exercise mimetic, meaning like it mimics
Mm.
exercise because of like the hormetic stress, that it's like a good stress that it puts on your body. So your blood pressure goes up transiently, but then after, your blood pressure goes down. And there was research that came out in 2017 by a big MD PhD. He's a cardiologist and a cardiac researcher in Finland, Dr. Jari Laukkanen.
Mm.
His first study, they looked at mostly cardiac markers, and it ended up with all cause mortality, 50% reduction in all cause
Mm.
mortality, or so basically meaning like everything that could kill you, the risk goes down if
Mm.
you do like regular sauna bathing. So maybe like 3 to 4 days a week, 20 minutes in the sauna. It's also a great way to get rid of all the weird stuff that our bodies aren't quite used to
Mm.
coming in contact with, like all the plastics and all the
Mm.
all the different types of waves that we're being exposed to.
Mm. Mm.
So it's just a great way to just kind of keep your system healthy. But in general,
Well, yeah,
movement, you want to find something that you
body
like.
weight.
Yeah, body weight stuff. I know you probably know him, or maybe you've heard of him. There's a really big carnivore guy he's just shredded and he just does only body weight. And I forget his name. I think he's Brazilian. He at least has a Portuguese last name, so he maybe,
Mm.
and he just does body weight and he looks fantastic. But I
Hmm.
think in general, you want to do something that is gonna that's gonna generally be not too painful or not too
Right. If it
annoying.
hurts, stop.
Yeah,
Find out
if
why.
it's discomfort for sure, like there's always going to be a little bit of discomfort if you do anything that's kind of going to give you good enough results that you have to kind of push yourself a little bit and get out of your comfort zone. But pain is no pain, no gain. That's not true.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just do,
Yeah.
like, a lot of people like Zumba. A lot of people get into spinning. A lot of people get into hiking and
Mhm.
all types of outdoor stuff that's people for some reason don't classify as exercise, but it totally is.
Activity. Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, um, okay. Um, what, I mean, assume that we return to something approaching normal, and I hate to use that word.
Let's
Um,
assume.
yeah, yeah. So, what what do you hope you're doing in 5 years from now?
Gosh, that's such a great one. Let's see, 5 years, Desmond's going to be 14. I currently, one of the things that I did not anticipate, I anticipated the pay cut. That I anticipated for sure. When I left that job, things were going really, really well for pharma in 2017 still, and I don't know where they are now, but I'm assuming if you're a drug company, they're probably not going that well if you got a president who's saying that we want you to match the lowest price around the world
Mm,
for your
mm.
drugs here in America, which is kind of it's a huge kind of ask. And I mean, I think it's going to help it's going to help patients who need medications, but
Well, yeah, the question is, do they need the medications? I
yeah,
mean,
that's for
that,
sure. Yeah. Are you enabling them?
yes,
Yeah.
yes. It's like
But
the people that got all excited because insulin was too expensive. And
and
how
now it's so
many,
much cheaper.
well, they were saying, how many diabetics won't be able to get, type 2 won't be able to get the insulin that they need. And I'm going, okay, is that the only approach?
That's a good thing to maybe reassess. My grandmother, the last 4 years of her life, she died at 96. She
Mm,
was she was just mentally as sharp as ever, but it just was like a cascade of things that happened, and a lot of the drugs that they started giving her metabolic issues, and then finally she got to the point where she was on the insulin. Oh my gosh, Peter, this was like she ballooned up, and she had emphysema and all these things, and her baseline was like if her blood sugar got below like 160,
mm.
she was feeling terrible,
Wow.
because they gave
Wow.
her insulin one Thanksgiving. I think it might have been the last Thanksgiving that before she passed, and she passed, thank God, right before this whole thing happened, because we would have
Mm,
all been just destroyed if we couldn't see her. So, and it was a breathing issue, it was like respiratory
Yeah,
issues.
yeah, yeah.
But
Wow.
she just ballooned, and they gave her the insulin when she left the facility, and then she came and she just didn't think about that she needed to eat carbohydrates, and her blood sugar went down to 60. Now for you and I, we probably won't feel a thing, we
Mm,
probably feel
mhm,
just fine, but for her that's dangerous.
mm,
And it
mm,
just goes to show that insulin really accelerated everything. So
mm,
you're right
mm.
about that. But I mean, just
Yeah.
in general, I was working for a big pharma company in 2017, and gosh, my brain is not working today, Peter. Remind me where we started. I just went off on this
In
tangent, and
5 years.
oh yeah, 5 years. Okay, so the thing that really hit me by surprise was that I had a pretty decent lifestyle. I mean, pretty amazing when you think about it. I got to wear scrubs every day, scrubs and sneakers. I had great hours. It was like 9 to 5, and I only saw my manager once a month. And so now I come home and I start working, and the first two things I realized was, number one, I'm sitting so much more, and
Mm,
because I'm used to walking around in hospital, so I had to start walking, and I got recording software so I could do consults and just record it, so I didn't have to take notes. But the amount of work that you do when you go from a 9 to 5 to working your own business is like you go from having a 9 to 5 to a 5 to 9. You're so passionate. And so I would like to flip in 5 years. My goal, and we've spoken about this very several times, is to flip it from working 70% of the time to working 30% of the time. And so everything that we're doing with our businesses is geared towards that. And the reason why is because we want to spend more time with our kids, spend more time with the family. And that would be totally unrealistic if we didn't have this cool world we live in where we can make money online and we can be anywhere. And it's just amazing what's happened where I remember when I first started, I didn't even have a website yet, and I was making money off of Instagram. Like I was just, people were seeing me on Instagram all over the world, and they were able to buy whatever it was that I was selling, and that's what enabled me to do this. So that's a big part of it. I definitely want to continue. We want to travel a lot. We That's a big part of our education philosophy with the boys. We focus on three things when we travel. We immerse ourselves in the culture. We challenge ourselves, like we get out of our comfort zone. So maybe it's zip lining, maybe it's swimming with whales, maybe it's whatever it is for our boys, to give them those opportunities to kind of get out of their comfort zone. And the last one and most important one, and I know you appreciate this one, is service. The ability to go to different places and gain a different perspective. Like, you're not going to complain about, your Amazon toy not getting here in 2 days if you go to Haiti and you see that they don't have running water. Like those things, they keep us grateful. So that's the main thing. Other than that, yeah, that's just kind of working less, spending more time with family. There's an idea floating around about, spending a year or two in a Spanish speaking country for the boys to really inculcate that Spanish, because just kind of sad to say that Spanish being my first language and Maura's first language, and our boys, they speak with a great accent, but they don't know Spanish the way we do, because they're not exposed to it daily, with the exception of Maura and I. Whenever we want to hide things from them, we speak in Spanish. So,
I was just thinking about Nancy's dad, who says the same thing about the folks speaking in Italian and thinking that the kids didn't understand. Um,
oh, really? And
so
it's some of these words they probably know them.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
that was the case.
yeah.
Well, cool. Where can people find you, and what sorts of things could they access now that we're in the remote world?
Yeah, so our website is fatfueled.family. So it's not fatfuelfamily.com. I wish it was. Someone took that. And that's where they can get the podcast. We have a blog. We share recipes. We share all types of stuff on that. We have our shop has, programs and courses and coaching and consults. And I wanted to tell you this because it's not happening yet, but we're in the editing stages. I wrote a kid's book, Peter. I wrote a
Really?
children's book. I took this massive masterpiece. Oh, I don't have it here. I usually have it right here. The How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Oh, yeah.
And I turned that into a children's storybook.
Nice.
And it's the first in a series because, like, I know of, for example, there's a series of books called Tuttle Twins, and we actually had the author on. We love them. They teach kids about economics and philosophy. So they'll take things like, I don't know if you've heard of this, but G. Edward Griffin's The Creature from Jekyll Island. It's like this big. It's about the Federal Reserve and monetary policy, and they turn it into a kid's book. And then there's an amazing essay called I Pencil, which is just, you've heard of that one? Isaac,
Absolutely.
whatever it is. It talks about how a pencil is not a pencil. A pencil is wood and paint and aluminum and rubber, and it's called The Miraculous Pencil. So they've got that taken care of with philosophy and economics, but we wanted to do kids books that would help them with like personal development and mindset. And so we have a list of books that we're going to do, and we're going to unite them with a thread of it's not going to be the same children in every book, but it's kind of, there's a plot that started in the first book that's going to extend into the second book. There's already a cliffhanger. And so that's just been really fun because I'd never done creative writing, and it was just a blast to write. So, and that's just, how I feel about children. I think it's amazing how things can change so quickly in a generation. And we had in the 70s, we had the war on, was it the war on poverty or the war on hunger?
The war on
And then what
poverty
was, and hunger too, right? Like in 5 years, we flipped it, and now we have all these diseases of plenty. And so it's the same thing is happening with this culture where we're getting more and more efficient. We're getting more and more, things are getting easier to access. It's a huge benefit for all of us, more convenience, but it also means that there's a sense of struggle and work and delayed gratification that's what makes us, that's what develops us as people. And like kids are missing out on that, and they're not having PE, and they're not having to run the mile and feel what it's like for their lungs to burn when they run a mile. And so there's just absolutely no challenge for them. And then, when they grow up, there's like, for me, have a strong feelings about my role as a father to boys. If I had girls, I know that it would be different. But with my boys, I know that it's important for me to pass the torch and tell them, you're a man now, son. I mean, that's they have to hear that. And if they don't hear it, I'm pulling from Wild at Heart, John Eldridge. I don't know if you ever read that book. Fantastic book.
I've not read it.
Well, it's basically like, if you don't pass that torch on, it's called the injury. And then it creates the
Mm,
false self, which can manifest as the ladies' man, the bully, the wimp, all
mm,
these non-optimal versions of ourselves. But if you tell your kid at the same time, you're a man now, and he doesn't have anything inside to say, I earned that, he's going to have some cognitive dissonance. So
yeah.
it's not because the whole thing about like everybody's a winner,
Mm,
it's the reason why people kind of rail against that. It's not because they're unsportsmanlike. It's because you're denying the people who worked
yeah.
hard the benefits. And so like what I tell Desmond, for example, on that little subject is like, winners don't lose, they learn. So you could be
Mm,
someone who wins all the time, but if you don't learn from it and you're
mm.
just winning because you're lucky, are you really a winner?
Yeah.
And so
One of the analogies is talking to people who maybe for 20 years they've done essentially the same thing, and they want to say, I've got 20 years experience. It's like, no, you've just repeated 20 years, right?
it's a great way to put
Uh,
it.
so the other thing that occurs is modeling what we'd like to see
Oh
in
my gosh, yes.
others. And you it's true, you can't keep it unless you give it away, but it's also true that you can't give it away if you ain't got it.
Yep.
So those things, and that ties in with my thought about, if that when you improve your health, you are improving the world,
Yes.
uh, because we have no idea who's watching, number one. um, some of us would rather watch a sermon than listen to one. So if how many people have we known who they restore their metabolic health, they lose weight? You don't have to lose weight to make impact on your metabolic markers. We know that now, but
Hmm.
frequently those two do go together, and people watching go, what are you doing? If
Yeah.
they don't say, are you sick? Like,
Yeah.
I know lots of people who the assumption was that they must have cancer if they've lost that much weight. I mean, it's remarkable where we've gotten to in this culture. And others, you've lost too much weight. That can't be good. It's
Yeah.
like, what?
I
How
know
did we
that's
get
that's
here?
a if that was me, I'd be like, I'd feel good about myself if someone said I lost too much weight.
Yeah.
If
Well,
I struggled with that for so long,
yeah,
I'd be
yeah,
like, you know
yeah,
what? That's a good problem to have. I'll handle that now. I guess I'll look
yeah,
at that one now.
yeah. So, um, I guess what before we wrap it, it's been great talking with you,
Always.
and it's too long.
I know.
It's one of the things I miss is the getting together. And I talked to someone the other night about, we need to go back to, the Brazilian steakhouse and make them cry. Um,
Yes. Yes. Make them be like, what the
we,
heck did
we're
we just?
closed. You can't
Yeah.
come here. We're
Yep. That's
closed.
the only place we go when we go out.
Yeah.
Because it's
Yeah.
like, why would I pay $50 for something that I can eat like triple at home and it probably cook it better? Because when you do it a lot, your steaks are good.
I do remember a couple of occasions going out to, places that were, nice places. And I'm there with the rancher, and he's like, no,
This is
no,
not going to cut it, right?
this is not right. Oh, we had one place that tried to convince me that what they gave me was a ribeye. And this is downtown St. Louis. You can see the arch from the place. And they're like, oh no, this is a ribeye. And we're looking at it going, no, it's not a ribeye. It's not.
Yeah.
It just isn't. It's the wrong shape. It's
Yeah.
the wrong, and several people there were in the beef industry, and they're like, it's like, okay, I get it. You work here, right? The cook is telling you what to tell people, right? I
Yeah.
get it. So I'll try to be nice, but
Was it a
maybe come
chuck eye
back.
at least, maybe?
No, no, it was more like a sirloin. It was,
Oh no, with a discerning person, you're gonna look at the marbling and you're just gonna be like, nope.
yeah, wrong shape,
Yeah.
wrong
Wrong
everything.
color. It's a different color, right? The sirloin is a little
Sometimes,
bit
yeah,
darker.
sometimes
I mean,
there's
I
a
guess
lot
it's
that
all the
goes.
same color, but it just, I don't know.
Well,
Maybe because of
sometimes
the
you can
marbling.
have differences in color and it affects the grade, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's just different.
Hmm.
So in any case, um, let's see. Um, if you could meet with, sorry, yes, different spelling. If you could meet with, say, a group of people from the beef industry, and again, I'm using a phrase that I hate, the beef industry, as if
Yeah, they
there's
make it
one.
sound like this monolith that's like these.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, there's that, and there's a lot of other things there. But what would you really like to learn from people involved in the ruminant animal agriculture that you don't feel like now? Or, yeah,
Yeah.
let's just leave it there.
I think I would love to know how, if it's possible, number one, and if it is, how could we move? I don't know if this is like, I haven't looked into it enough. That's why I don't know. That's why I want to learn about it.
Hmm.
How could we move into a situation where ranchers can get together and get into the packing side and get into the processing so that they can have one, more power, have two, I don't know if it's possible with the way, for example, in this country, like I don't know if there's I'm assuming that there's going to be, in addition to all of the typical barriers to entry that there would be financially, and just from a standpoint of like, I don't know if I want to get into that. I don't know if I want to
Hmm.
learn that, but
Hmm.
also there's probably going to be legal issues that kind of, favor that would, like laws that would keep out,
Hmm.
that would discourage people from doing that. I don't know. I just maybe it's not needed, but it
Hmm.
would be kind of cool to see more ranchers, give the ranchers a little bit more ability, and if it's not possible, I just want to learn why, just so I can,
Hmm.
you know, just learn about that. Yeah.
Hopefully, what we can do is we can foster conversations from producer through consumer, in all phases of the chain.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and just like when we talk about sustainability, I want to include healthcare.
Oh yeah.
I want to include, the well-being of the societies as well as direct environmental footprints.
Yeah.
So I think the only way we can do that is by having more conversations like this, and hopefully get us together in various ways,
Yes.
either virtually or hopefully, analog versions soon. So, my friend, thank you so much for taking the time,
It's my
and
pleasure.
I look forward to the new um, venture of children's book author. I think that's awesome.
Yeah,
Um,
it's just a labor of love,
Sure, of course. Why not?
Yep.
Why not?
Yeah.
That's, I think, what should drive us to a certain extent in
Oh yeah.
the lives we're living. So, let's see. You're on Twitter, yes? Fat Fueled
Oh yeah,
Family.
I should definitely, yeah. So Fat Fueled Families on Twitter.
Okay.
We're trying to be more active there. I usually tend to just post from Instagram, so it's,
Okay.
I don't do
And
lots of
there it's the
tweets.
same thing.
On Instagram, it's DannyVega.ms.
Okay.
DannyVega.ms. And Facebook, you'll find DannyVega.ms. And YouTube, you'll find Fat Fueled Family. So generally, if they get to Fat Fueled to the website or the Twitter, they're going to find the other ones.
And I'll try to remember to post that in the description for the video and the audio when that goes up. So
Awesome.
thank you again, my brother.
Thank you,
Be
Pete.
well.
Yes. Talk to you soon.